Well, good evening, good afternoon to everyone who is joining the Innovators Circle. Thank you for joining us this week. I am very pleased to introduce my special guest, Maria Boulden. I'm going to give you Maria's wonderful, auspicious bio here in just a moment because I know you're going to really love hearing about her background. And she actually has some little tips embedded in her background that we're going to use to jump off and have our discussion today. But I also wanted to give a shout to my good friend and colleague, Nishit Gupta. He is a Columbia Business School alum. And Nishit is the individual who introduced me to Maria sometime last year. And at the time, she was an executive partner at Gartner in charge of the sales practice, which is what we're going to talk about today, her career in sales. So a shout out to Nishit if you're watching today. Thank you for the introduction to Maria. I always appreciate it when I get introductions to people that are in your network because it just allows the pods and the discussions and the relationships to grow exponentially. So again, if there are other individuals that have innovative backgrounds, experiences, ideas, businesses, please get in touch, share their backgrounds with me, and I would love to meet them. So on to Maria, our special guest. So just so that I do her justice, Maria is a C-suite advisor and consultant. She specializes in profitable revenue generation and leading world-class commercial teams. One of the things that Maria wants to speak with us about today is the business to business or B2B ecosystem is so rapidly and dynamically evolving that its speed is outpacing the ability for most companies to adjust their commercial strategy. It's outpacing their ability to create new strategies, to recalibrate go-to-market models, to implement process and organizational design, to think through forecast and risk assessments, to look at variable compensation models, manage change and disruption before individuals and sales organizations themselves are disrupted. And these are Maria's specialties, to think through the changes in that B2B ecosystem and help companies that might be a little bit slow to respond figure out how to look around corners and get ahead of their game. She also helps companies adapt quickly when that disruption has already occurred. Sometimes, as we know, we're looking in the rearview mirror. That can sometimes be the scariest situation that we encounter. But trust me, Maria is your trusted advisor, and she makes all of that look easy too. As far as her background, Maria has spent the last 5 years leading Gartner's executive partner team for chief revenue, sales, and commercial officers. She's also operated as an executive partner to these C-suite executives who have faced some really turbulent times in the commercial markets and throughout their careers. Now, she retired from Gartner only recently, August of 24. She's going to talk we're going to mention that for just a moment. But prior to Gartner, Maria spent 33 years with DuPont, right here, a company in the Delaware area, where she was a proven commercial executive deployed to, and this is how we got the title for today's session, fix broken sales teams. Compelling title, right? Drive profitable growth where it was most elusive and create successful global partnerships at every level in the value chain. She worked in the area of safety and construction, running that commercial team. She ran DuPont's photovoltaic portfolio and a myriad of other businesses. Now, Maria is no stranger to the world of academics, and she graduated with a degree in chemical engineering, summa cum laude, from Drexel University, also in her own backyard in Philadelphia. And she has expertise in Six Sigma. Now, on to the fun part. Since she's retired, Maria is trying to rewire, not retire. And she lives in Delaware, Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, with her husband, her family. And she co-owns a small business, which I found fascinating. She is making her own jams and jellies. And it's a B2C business, so a very different experience for Maria. It's already phenomenally successful. She's only been at it for 2 months.
Oh, a year.
And she's She's an avid runner, loves the sand and the salt and the water. So you can find her enjoying herself at Rehoboth Beach. So, Maria, welcome. It's an honor and a pleasure. And I think one of the first things that I want to ask you about is unpack how you fix broken sales teams, right? You have a lot of experience. Talk with us about how you do that.
It's a great question, Lorraine. There's no one size fits all, especially in this commercial world. So, one of the first places I tend to look when I would inherit a new business was the buyer journey. And it's your target buyers, your target segments, not all, you can't be all things to all people. Who's making the decisions where you most want to influence a decision? Why are they making those decisions? How do they find us? How do they find our competitors? In a company like DuPont, where most people believed the science sold itself, our technology sold itself, spoiler alert, that was never true. But because of that legacy belief, most people would rather do the things the way we always did, the way we were always successful, because we were category creators. So, of course, you're going to sell. So, we would do more of the same. Sell with strong relationships. If a person had charm and communication skills, put them and lots more like them out in the field, sell, sell, sell. And unfortunately, that's basically like using sellers as a blunt force object, and it's painful for everybody. And we also tended to abdicate all power and access to the value chain, to decision makers, to our distributors. Instead of treating them like channel partners, we treated them like customers. And unfortunately, that hurt them just as much as it hurt us. So, again, one of the first things I would do in a new organization is try to understand how our target customers, not the distributors, not the people who transformed the products we sold, but the actual people who extracted value from our brand. How and why did they buy? And then think about how we needed to sell and recalibrate from there. Instead of starting from what we had and trying to leap to that, work your way back. And that was really hard in DuPont, where institutional knowledge was both a sword and a shield, where we usually focused on what we already had, um, again, versus what we needed to be successful in our markets. And statistically, data wise, research wise, people spend twice as much time trying to hold on to what they have as they do actually trying to go out and get what they don't. So the hardest sale that I always had to make was convincing people internally at every level of the organization, even the CEO, why we needed to change, why that innovation mindset, that curiosity beyond our technology, but in the market sense. And frankly, that customer focus that we all like to talk about, but we didn't actually give, would bring us to a better place. So, first things I would do was start with the buyer journey and basically work my way back to the go to market strategy we needed versus the one we had.
That's terrific. I love the fact that you started with the customer in the center of your plan, and then that more or less guided the other decisions that you made. I know you said that you had some interesting experiences when you were in the construction
Mhm.
commercial business in terms of going in there and fixing that. Maybe you can share a little bit.
Sure. Well, I mean, some of the biggest things, and we've talked about this before, both internally and externally. There's challenges. Construction business can be a very legacy business, a lot of old relationships, old behaviors, and a lot of challenges with how that business, that vertical cycles. And there are a lot of external factors that influence it. But in a lot of cases, what was happening there was happening throughout DuPont, where it was very budget driven, and I would find that the organization design was just a patchwork quilt based on what the budgets enabled or taketh away. So it was what was left after these budget cuts would eliminate people and resources that were easy to cut fast, followed by ads that were easy to make fast when budget suddenly got liberated. And even when they were planned, it was very small, incremental, and safe. Not a lot of innovation, not a lot of connection to strategy, even when one existed. And more often than not, one didn't, especially in this particular part of the business. And even when a loose one existed, there was no connection to practical execution. So in a lot of cases in this particular business, both internally and externally, knowledge was power, and it was yielded to maneuver for budget and position. That wasn't helping us. So I'm not saying it's not important to be budget driven. We all have a number, and we all have a budget, but to do that without a strategy is very dangerous. And even outside DuPont, when I was at Gartner, I was shocked how many companies were operating not just without a sales strategy, but without a corporate strategy, at least a really concise, complete one. So for us to differentiate, especially in the construction market, we had to do a couple things. We had to again understand buyer journeys, and it's not just again transactional partners. It's who are the national builders, who are the local builders, and beyond that, who are the architects, who are the people who set building code. How do we influence them? And then at the same time influence the internal sale. How do we drive a clear data-driven story? This is what I know. This is how I know it. This is why it's okay for us to sell beyond the distributors and go downstream. Keep the distributors healthy, keep the distributors whole, partner with them to create that demand for our brand downstream and pull it through. Because this is what the market's telling us they want. And pilot those new ways to build some of that confidence and expected ROI that actually is based on a reality. So again, budget still drove where we took things in that vertical as well as the others, but we gave it a clear reason and a clear purpose. And there's times I gave back budget I didn't need, fully running the risk that it would get reallocated, especially in that construction business. But to this day, I heavily have encouraged CROs and CSOs to be ready to have like a top three. What are you going to cut? And a top three, what are you going to add when budget suddenly gets liberated? So again, what I had to combat in DuPont, especially in that construction industry, is over-indexing on the things that gave us success, over-indexing on the things that gave our channel partners familiarity, as well as the other people we engaged, and our leaders at every level liked being out in the market. They liked going to see transactional customers, and that was hurting us a lot. I'm not saying there's not a time and a place for it, but at the executive level where we're needed most is developing how we're going to get to the next number. Hire the right people, let the right people lead who can deliver this number. And for a lot of commercial executives, that was real in DuPont, especially, that was really uncomfortable. Sitting at headquarters with functional peers, C-suite peers, much less partnering with your finance group and your CFO, was uncomfortable. Because how we found success in the commercial world, especially in DuPont, was out there. So bringing it back in, creating a concise, data-driven approach based on our strategy, and driving it together, and in the higher levels, having that functional trust. Again, when you think about it, all the other C-suite leaders and executives think they can do the sales job, think they can lead commercial teams. Ours is the only job in the C-suite where that belief exists. And our job is to sell internally based on what we know and the data and what the market is telling us. And when you do that, people realize that this is a profession and this is a science. So when you get that understanding in your internal teams, that our remit is to drive the strategic, intentional approach and leadership. You choose the right people around you. They'll deliver the number this month, this quarter, this year, with a little help from you every now and then. That was a big shift in DuPont. We owe it to our teams to enable next year's number and to build the teams that'll deliver it. What got us to the job, to what had gotten me to the job and so many of my peers to the job, wouldn't enable us to stay in the job. So a lot of people in my role and outside DuPont focused on gap closures because they feel like they need to live to fight another day. I had to change that in DuPont, because when you have that mentality as a CSO or a CRO, next year comes and there's no strategy, at least not something executable that's going to make it a better year because you were too busy living to fight another day or to achieve that audacious growth number that just got plunked down in front of you for the new year. And that's a big reason why CSOs, average out about 10 months. So that ability to take data, to take market intelligence, to create a new go-to-market strategy in this particular case, and I can go into more detail about a particular business in safety and construction, and convince both the outside world and your inside world that it needs to happen. And again, I've got some examples I can go into there of how I did it. That was one of the biggest paradigm shifts for our company, and probably where we made the most ground.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. I'm sure that sales professionals around the meeting room today, virtual meeting room, are nodding their heads in agreement. Who would go into the attorney's office and say, well, I can do your job just as well as you do, or walk into the R&D office and say, I can do the R&D job. But you're right. Everybody seems to think that sales is something that they all are able to do. So it's terrific that you found a way to move people off of the status quo, being in that kind of firefighting or defensive mode, and really thinking more strategically about their role. And I think upping the professionalism of it. So I think that's really valuable advice. And I know we're going to get to some of your tips at the end, but this work that you did so successfully, and we should come back to construction in a moment. When you went to Gartner, it gave you or engendered you with a title or a name, and it was the CSO, the Chief Sales Officer Whisperer.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe transition us to now you're the CSO Whisperer based on all of this fabulous experience of what you achieved at DuPont. And now you're helping a large number of CSOs figure out these same sorts of things in their organizations. How did that work in terms of partnering with some of these individuals? And what was one of the biggest learnings that you had in the last 5 years?
You know what? It was really interesting because I had never thought I could learn so much so fast at this stage in my career. I mean, I guess we all have a little bit of arrogance in us, some more than others. And I came out of DuPont feeling pretty confident about what I could do, and my leadership capabilities, as well as my body of knowledge when it came to commercial aptitude and business acumen. But I had spent 33 years, great years, and years I'm really proud of, seeing the commercial world and the world literally through my eyes. In that role as an executive partner, and having the privilege to lead the team of executive partners at Gartner, within the revenue and sales practice, I had the chance to see the world through hundreds of executive eyes, and to see business models and successes and failures and humanity in exponential ways that I could have never dreamed. So that was probably my biggest revelation in that role. It's probably the thing that made me love it the most. And I joined in May of 2019. So we all know the economic car wash and humanity ringer that we all went through in the year that followed. And it was fascinating to me to watch the impact on the B2B world. And frankly, one source of pride is to feel like I played any role in being a thought partner, being peripheral vision, and being a source of guidance and support to CROs and CSOs and CCOs during what is arguably the fight of our careers.
Yeah, and I imagine that you're referring here to COVID, had a big
Absolutely.
impact. Yeah. Any particular story stand out? I know you talked about the fact that being a CSO, CRO during that particular time was lonely,
Hmm.
cut off from
Hmm.
customers, cut off from your teams, cut off from what is the lifeblood of
Yeah.
being a commercial professional, right, which is interpersonal relationships and the ability to connect. What were maybe one of a story that stands out in terms of someone that you had to help through
Yeah.
the difficult time?
Sure. Absolutely. So it's an interesting role as an executive partner, and some people love it and some people hate it, um, because your hands aren't the ones on the wheel. You know, you're giving guidance to another executive who doesn't have to take your advice, doesn't have to take your counsel. Part of our job is to challenge, but they don't have to listen. But the best clients I had were the ones that were open minded, um, were the true innovative leaders that you and I have talked about, and are bold enough to recognize that change is needed. And one example of that, and Gartner has done tons of case studies, was the great work that Andy Clement did at Kimberly Clark. So much like DuPont, their commercial ecosystem had been changing long before the pandemic in terms of buying behaviors, and the evolution from people who wanted to buy in person to people who mostly wanted to do their homework and complete most of the buying process online. And that was true long before we were all forced into isolation and this little virtual box that we all sit in right now. Um, but in Andy's case, he saw it already. He was seeing their commercial needs changing within their customer base. So he did the hard work. We partnered together where he, with completely open mind and incredible organizational support from his leadership team at every part of KCP, looked at their buying journey with no incredulous discussions, just complete curiosity and open minds to say, this is what our buyers are telling us. We now see, after years of believing what we've always believed, what they're really asking us to do, what they're asking us to be, and how they want us to supply them and support them. And with that open mind and that willingness to try, they completely recalibrated their go-to-market strategy based on that journey, rewired it to what they needed versus what they always had. And yes, that was a hybrid model where most of the time people were, commercial resources were online, and they were given the ability to use their judgment on when they should go to see a customer in person. And they had a various series of signals that they looked for to confirm that was the case, that it was needed. And in the Gartner case study, we showed they were able to significantly reduce their sales cycle time and at the same time, significantly increase their top line. And frankly, as great a job as they did, the best part of it was their open-mindedness and their willingness to go after it and to try this new innovation in their go-to-market strategy. And they drove it with their intentional leadership, visible, vocal leadership, with a data-driven approach and a willingness to let go of the past and drive towards the future. It was really remarkable work. And you can get the Gartner case study and it'll go into a lot more details, but great
Yeah.
job by Andy Clement and the Kimberly Clark team.
Yeah, wonderful example. I know we're going to go into your tips in just a minute here,
Mhm.
But in terms of overcoming resistance, it
Yeah.
sounds as though what you laid out made a lot of sense, and also what Andy laid out made a lot of sense. It's based on the customer journey. It's very data driven. You show how you're going to implement it successfully. You talked about piloting it. But as we all know, particularly in corporations where it might be unsafe to fail or experiment, you're always going to have some resistors hanging on. And so, did you come up with a tip, a technique, a message point, something that worked with the harder, more entrenched resistor? Or did you just have a strategy where you went to the adopter, the people that were kind of easy to influence, and
Mm.
you didn't worry so much about the resistors, unless they're on your network map and a really critical point and you have to work with them? But how did you deal with strong resistors?
It's a great question, Lorraine. Um, if I think about one of the businesses where I did a pretty major overhaul, if I'm honest with myself, I wasn't the first leader to see it. In fact, I wasn't the first to look at journey maps and think about a new go-to-market strategy. In this one particular business in the construction platform at DuPont, there were 5 other leaders who had spent 7 figures to hire Bain, Deloitte, McKinsey, and others. There were binders that were prepared that showed the way for that particular point of time, showed a clear path of what to do, but no one ever executed it. Because what the market was asking for was so different from anything else we had done. And I think where they had fallen short, besides, a little bit of CYA mixed in, is they didn't do enough to take that work, do some scenario planning, do some risk assessment, and develop the leading indicators, the guardrails that would help the organization and the leadership team understand what part of the horizon we should watch so that we knew that it was working or it wasn't, and what we would do depending on what we saw.
Mm.
And this is where we really needed that innovative mindset and curiosity. But to get people to liberate their minds to that point, we were still a technology company bent on data, and we needed those leading indicators. We needed that sight line to what success looked like, and an understanding of the failure modes and what we would do about them if we saw them. And that's where my Six Sigma background helped. But the other thing that helped was a little bit of an attitude, and we the Philly in me comes out every now and then, and I basically gave everybody, when we were trying to close the internal sale to make this major go-to-market change, I gave everybody a little metal bucket, literally a little metal bucket. You put your pens in it and things like that. And basically encourage them that the attitude that they needed to have after we've done all the data analysis, after we've done the risk assessments, after we've done the scenario plans and understand the failure modes, it rhymes with bucket. and I gave them all, and I told them, when you lead in a data-driven way, when you've done all this work in advance, it is not reckless, it is not impetuous. We are ready for this. But it wasn't enough to take the rest of the organization to believe it either. It wasn't enough to show the data and the work that we had to do. We had to show them again to the rest of the organization from a change management standpoint. This is the part of the horizon we want you to watch. Again, that same expression. Then it didn't feel like we were careening away from what always worked without guardrails. Then we could say, bucket, and have it be more than just reckless bravado. So
Yeah. So
in
you
less
knew.
than a year, we added a lot of money to the pipeline and the top line.
That's great. So you knew what you were looking at on the horizon to know if it was working or was not.
Yep.
And that word that rhymes with bucket, I think it's really important in a culture and as a leader of change that you come up with the lexicon, the icons, the cultural norms, the symbols. And so your bucket was your word for making it very safe to fail, to experiment. Nothing's going to happen. We're just going to get out here and do it. So I love the fact that you use that word to give everybody some free license to to fail or experiment, if you will. I know we're at the top of the hour, Maria, but I don't want to depart without your sharing. I think you had 3 key tips for sales professionals who are in situations where they're trying to turn things around or make a difference. So close us out with those 3 tips, please.
You got it. There's 4, but I'll be fast. First
Okay.
of all, understand with market data what your customers want, how they buy, why they buy. Yeah, people get scared off by buyer journey mapping. That's all it is. How they buy, why they buy. You'll find some quick hits in there that'll help you lead your leaders to deliver this year's number. But then be innovative, be intentional, be bold in building a go-to-market strategy that aligns with that buying journey and your corporate strategy so that you're set up to reach next year's number. And while you're at it, educate your C-suite peers and your CEO on that journey and partner with them, especially your CFO, to secure the resources you need and the functional partnerships you need. There is nothing we can do at the executive level without the support and partnership of our functional peers. And keep your bucket handy if you or anybody else needs a reminder. And like I've always told my teams, when you're doing this, don't look back and don't look down, because you're going to grow faster than you expected.
Don't look up. Don't look up and don't look down. Just
don't look back.
Don't look back. Right.
And don't look down. Stay looking up.
Stay
Nobody
looking up.
grows looking at their feet.
Straight ahead. Oh, that's terrific. Well, listen, I think if you follow Maria's 4 tips, hopefully you will be half as successful as she's been in her career at DuPont and also at Gartner. So it's been terrific, Maria, sharing this very tangible, concrete advice with all of us, whether we're in the sales profession or not. It's always a good reminder. Keep the customer in the forefront. Look straight ahead. Don't look back. Don't look down. And just use that data. And I think also make sure that you identify some quick wins. You're focused on those critical metrics that you need to follow. And you can always change the plan. You can always change the direction if you need to. So
in this environment, plan on it.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Well, this has been wonderful. Continued good success with your jam and jelly business. And Maria is...
I do still have a corporate life too, though.
Yeah, she has a corporate life. Look her up on LinkedIn. She's open to doing consulting work and chatting with you and giving advice. She's got this B2C business. She's going to be running the Rehoboth half soon. So you might see her out there on the running trail. And it was a pleasure, Maria. So thank you for
so much, Lorraine. What a privilege.